Hey, Doug, how are you?
Fine, and how are you?
All right.
Hope you got out today and enjoyed the weather.
A little bit.
Yeah. My car thermometer said 67 this afternoon. Man,
It's been a
oh,
long time coming.
yeah. Yep. Yep. Pretty good. How's things in your neighborhood?
Actually, a lot's going on. The house at the corner of Baltimore and South Prospect's being renovated. In fact, McIntyre is there doing heating and cooling.
I saw their trucks there this morning. Yeah.
We are
And then,
live, just so you guys know. Sorry, I should have came on and told you guys, but we're live.
Oh, okay.
All righty.
We're 2 minutes from 4. I'm sorry, I just went a little early. I know you guys are having a conversation.
It's okay.
Sorry. Stevie's still rocking the 50s. Oh my God, it really is. I see a little bit of color. Is it the red one that you and I got when you just put it home thing? The one that we all three got, the same thing? I know it's probably. Oh, okay. So maybe it's
Hi,
just
Shelley.
it's an older box. Yeah, it doesn't have color film. Steve is still moving. I think there's a lot. Uh-oh. Look at this.
And Megan, do we have Tony Taylor on?
I just admitted someone that might be.
The phone number.
It's a phone number. Not sure who that phone number is.
301 number.
If I remember correctly, Tony called in by phone at the last meeting, if I remember.
Yeah, I think.
Yep.
Might want to ask.
Hi, it's Chris.
Oh, that's Chris.
Hey, Chris. Oh, is that you on the phone, Chris?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
They just switched our internet from Verizon to Antietam, and I'm not set up yet. So
Oh, okay.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, Jim.
My phone is nervous.
Yeah, me too. I'm so paranoid.
I'll
I
probably start our video so they can see us.
I know. I think I saw Ron said he'll be with us.
Oh.
We'll wait a couple more seconds for that. Because I didn't see Colin's response.
Colin said he'd be participating late this afternoon.
I'm sorry, I missed that. What'd you say about Colin again?
I emailed him this afternoon at about 3 o'clock or 2:30. He said he'd be participating.
Okay, super.
Yep, here he is. And Ron.
All right. And there's Ron. We have a full house. All right, I'm going to get started then. Good afternoon. Welcome to the City of Hagerstown's Planning Commission meeting for March the 10th, 2021. We're meeting virtually. With me today is Chris Davis, Colin Ploskaroo, Jim Stone, Ron Thomas, Judy Weller, and myself, Doug Wright, is joining in. Staff with us today is Kathy Marr, Director of Planning and Code Administration, Steve Bachmiller, ready now, Development Review Planner and Zoning Administrator. It's a big one. Megan Flick, Planner, Debbie Calhoun, the glue, the Commission Secretary. So welcome again. First item on the agenda is the approval of minutes from February the 24th.
This is Chris. I move to approve the minutes.
Thank you.
I'll second.
That was Ron seconding. We're ready to vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed?
Abstain.
Thank you. May pass. Next, we have a development review, which is North Point Building 3, which was tabled at our last meeting.
Is there someone here representing the applicant?
I don't see anyone else on here.
This is pretty simple. I mean, I think we can move forward if you want to.
Let's do it.
Okay. This is carried over from your last meeting. There were questions about what the backing material was on the proposed fences. We received much clearer photographs of comparable fencing, which I emailed out to you all about a week ago, I guess now. And those photographs are now shown up on the screen. It's an ornamental black metal fence, but it's got a wire mesh behind it. Staff level thinks this is great, but I'm just not comfortable in signing off on something like this. So staff recommends approval.
You want to show the picture of the gate too?
There you go.
And here we have a tighter and more sturdy mesh,
Yeah.
again, on the inside of the fence.
And it's there to prevent people from tampering with the lock system.
Any comments? Questions?
No, the only thing I was questioning was that blue coloring that was behind, and it's not there now. So I'm assuming that may have been something as a result of the printer or whatever.
Now that was drawn by hand, I'm sure, and it represents that mesh that you see at the gate.
Okay. I'm satisfied.
Any other comments?
I have no issues.
I'm fine.
Good here. Good to me.
All righty, I'll take a motion.
So move.
Second, this is Chris.
Now, we are approving the waiver of the landscaping for the fence. Not the fence itself, but this is being shown as the fence that they will be putting in. Correct, Steve?
Correct.
That is correct.
All righty.
Okay. Then, yeah, that's the way I should have worded it. I was just voting on what I was reading on the paper.
Thank you. Are we ready to vote? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I certainly appreciate getting better information there. Sorry it took us 2 weeks to get this approved. Okay. Next, we have a review of the waiver form. Interestingly enough.
And there's a reason why I had you all go forward with your application you just had before you first, because that's a waiver. But basically, I'm not going to rehash the whole memo, but we're thinking that we need to formalize our waiver approval process a little bit more. There are standards in your ordinance for granting a waiver. They're extremely loose, and you only need to meet one of the 6. It's not like the BZA where you have to meet everything. Basically, you just need to find justification in one of those 6 standards in order to grant a waiver. I included a copy of the waiver application form for your review, which went into effect on January 1. It's not a whole lot different than what we had before, but it does cite at the bottom of the first page those 6 criteria. They're pretty loose, and you only need to meet one of the 6. But my thought is that if you're going to grant waivers in your motion when you approve them, which more often than not comes along with the approval of a development plan or a site plan, that you ought to have something in your motion that explains your justification for granting a waiver to your adopted standards. So one of the things that we could do, we do this with the Historic District Commission, is we actually have like a checklist where we could produce one. So if somebody's making a motion, they can look at the checklist and figure out which of the 6 and create some language in their motion for justifying the approval. I don't want to overdo this, but I'm just thinking we need something more than, yeah, okay, let's grant the waiver. It still won't be anywhere close to the legal standard that BZA employs, nor should it. But I think we need a little bit more than what we got currently been doing.
Is this an update of the one that appears every so often in some of the waiver requests that we see?
Yes. And actually, we've been, even at the staff level, we've been kind of hit or miss on how we approach this. Sometimes we've discovered this stuff at the last minute. We mentioned it verbally at your meeting. It does end up on the agenda, but sometimes it's so late in the process, it doesn't end up in your staff report. We're trying to formalize things on our end as well a little bit. So anytime that you have a waiver application, you will see this Schedule W, this application form that provides you a description of the request and all before you actually come into your meeting. So we're formalizing things a little bit more on our end as well.
Now, Steve, will that come in with one of those 6 items that you feel is the most appropriate to use in order to pass the waiver already checked and approved by the staff?
Well, it's not approved by us, but we can make in our recommendation, and actually frequently we do make a recommendation on whether or not waivers should be approved. What we could do in our staff report is formalize things in our staff report even a little bit more, saying staff believes it meets criteria 1 or 2 and 4 or whatever on our end. So we could do that as well.
That's fine, Steve. That's what I was getting at. It would
about-
kind of lead us in the right direction for us to make a decision if we're kind of sitting on the fence.
Mm-hmm.
What about having the applicant check a box for any one of those 6 or whatever, so that we know under what criteria he's applying for also?
Okay, so make them make their own argument. That makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
yes.
a good idea.
Yeah.
Okay, I can adjust the application form to do that.
Okay, that's good.
Any other thoughts?
None. I make a motion that we accept the waiver form as presented with the suggestions that we added.
I'll second.
All righty, we don't need a motion, but a motion wouldn't hurt. So I'll accept that motion and second.
Okay.
Any discussion? Further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? That carries then. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, boy, we're moving. All righty. Last one on our agenda is discussion of the Land Management Code amendment for front yard fence provision.
Sorry, where what is? But no, you're up. Okay. I just forgot a document, so I wanted to go make sure I have it. Okay.
Megan Flick will be handling this item.
Hello. Okay, so we have been receiving concerns from property owners at Hager's Crossing, whose homes have dual frontage lots with side or rear frontage on Hager's Crossing Drive. They basically want to install privacy fences to enclose their rear yards. However, Hager's Crossing Drive is considered a minor roadway, minor collector roadway. And as currently written, rear and side streets can be treated like any other property line when the street is not a higher classification than the street on which the lot has its principal front. So all the streets in Hager's Crossing are local streets, except for Hager's Crossing Drive and Bartow Drive. Therefore, Hager's Crossing Drive is treated as a front street for these lots, and fencing is limited to open fences up to 3 feet high. And then there's 52 total single-family lots at Hager's Crossing with side or rear yards on Hager's Crossing Drive, Bartow Drive, or McDade Road, which are all minor collector streets. And then all of those residents find a 3 feet tall open fence insufficient for their rear yards. So for the section of the code that we're looking at, Article 4, Section K1b. So again, we're proposing to just take a look at this and maybe see if we need to change things so that those residents aren't so limited with the current fence requirements. So the 4 different options are, the first would be to make no change. The second would be to remove the provision entirely, which would allow all properties with side and rear frontage to be treated like all others. The third is to remove the provision for the lowest grade of comprehensive plan roadway, but minor collector roadway. And then modify it to say, this provision shall not apply when the side street or street to the rear is a major collector or arterial roadway as determined by the city engineer. In such cases, a front yard fence limitations shall continue to apply, which would allow those properties on Hager's Crossing Drive and other roads to fence their entire rear yard with privacy fences, but also retain the provision for the higher classification roads. And then the fourth option is to retain the provision, but provide an exception for a uniform standard on minor collector roadway. So we would include an amendment that prescribes a fence design standard for privacy fences, which could sound something like the red font there on number 4. And that would just maintain uniformity and then allow HOAs to propose alternate designs and control it that way. I don't know if we want to discuss this first before we talk about the height as separate issues.
Give it all.
Okay. And then the other issue is receiving feedback that the 3 foot tall fence models are difficult to find because the industry standard is 4 feet tall. So we've looked at some 4 foot tall examples, and staff suggests that the maximum height for front yard open fences could be increased to 4 feet without any issues. And the typical, again, white picket fence model and scale of the typical home is about 4 feet tall. I do have photos of the document I was running to get. I'll bring that up in a second. But basically, we're just proposing to increase the maximum from 3 feet to 4 feet. I think City of Williamsburg allows 4 feet in height. And then we were also looking at the spacing in between the picket fences for front yard fences. Our code says that the spaces between pickets need to be as wide as the pickets themselves. But traditional picket fences tend to have the spacing narrower than the pickets unless it's the round picket type. So we could set a narrower standard for spacing, something that inspectors would easily be able to measure and enforce. So I think our suggestion is spacing between wood or vinyl pickets needs to be at least 1 inch wide or half the width of the picket, whichever is greater. So for a 1 inch picket, there'd be a 1 inch gap, 2 inch picket, 1 inch gap, 2.5 inch picket, 1.25 inch gap, and then a 3 inch picket would be a 1.5 inch gap. And then I think that's all of our proposals. Because it's a growing concern for all of the new homeowners at Hager's Crossing, we do recommend scheduling a public review meeting for March 31st if you all are in favor of amending this, I guess, front yard fence issue in some way. And then for attachments, we have the code itself, the section of the code that we're looking at. And then Kathy also put together, here's some photos too. Kathy put together a spreadsheet showing where this is an issue in properties throughout the city. And then let me bring up the example of the 3 and 4 foot tall picket fences to show you the difference between the spacing.
So what we're looking at is Hager's Crossing is considered the primary street. Is that correct?
It's a minor collector road, yeah.
Okay. And what are Medade Road is considered a main collector road?
Also,
Also, they're all minor collectors.
They're all minor.
Yeah. Okay, here we go.
So I guess the thing that's going on here is you're trying to set up a system where you don't have completely enclosed privacy fences on these minor collected roads that make it look like it's some type of compound or barrier or fort enclosure. Is that what we're trying to get away from?
I think the code already says that, but what we're trying to do is make it so that people aren't so limited by the 3 foot tall front yard fence in those areas where it is kind of a rear yard, where they want a privacy fence and a front yard fence just isn't really sufficient.
And as you can see from that chart of street classifications, the minor collectors don't tend to be what we think of as arterial roads. In fact, Landville in the West End is a minor collector. Apparently, it's all based on the number of vehicle trips. That's how engineering divides the streets into these categories.
Well, I'm not so concerned about the height of the fence as I am with having a solid fence that makes it look like you've got a fortress there. And if you get over that fence, you're going to walk into some type of self-defense compound with machine guns.
The primary motivation for creating that standard, keep in mind, before you couldn't have, years ago, you couldn't have any front yard fence against any street. But the intent was that in order to keep our main thoroughfares in and out of town, and we used the comprehensive plan standard, the city engineer's classification system is a standard. So the main roads in and out of town, if they have properties backing up to them, they don't end up looking like cattle chutes. And and then poorly coordinated ones where one person has a brown wood fence and the next one has a beige vinyl fence and the next one has a white composite fence. The idea was to keep our main roads in and out of town that happen to have a house backing up to them looking a bit more uniform and not like a cattle chute.
Well, I think you and I are talking the same thing, because the cattle chute to me is the same as like having a fortress barrier there. So I think the suggestion that Megan gave of having the opening half the width of the actual slats or in the fence is a good start. And we have to come up with something that's going to satisfy us and the customer, the property owner.
We got two different subjects here.
Yeah.
One of them is fencing on the side and backyard yards. The second one is the picket fence, which would be in the front yard.
Oh, okay.
We didn't get quite done with the with her presentation on the picket fence. We can come back to that if that's okay. We can go back and concentrate on this one first and then go to picket fence. But there are two different ones.
Okay, I'm sorry. I thought that they were all combined. That's my error.
That's all right. It's all right.
Well, I guess which one do you consider the most important that we really need to address that will have the most discussion, I think that's the one we ought to take care of.
Probably
And see
the
if
one
we
on
can
the
come-
screen right
Huh?
now. Probably the one on the screen right now.
Okay. Okay.
I would like to, it'd be in a nice, perfect world to choose 4, but 4 will not work. Individuals will be putting up even different styles of white vinyl fences. They won't look the same. There'll be different levels of maintenance. There'll be some who will put them up and some who won't put them up. So you have the missing tooth views. It just will be beyond reasonable control. So I think that number 3 is probably the best for us now, and to choose that and hope that takes care of things. In an even better, real wonderful world would be the next time we see these developments come in that have these situations, we require the developer to put in a fence that's all the way, that's uniform, that passes our review, and then the buyers, that's the fence they get. But that's fraught with problems also.
Yes.
So, to me, I think number 3 is the most reasonable solution right now.
I would point out too that some HOAs are more restrictive than this anyway in terms of allowing fences. So nothing here prevents HOA from having standards that are more restrictive than what we have here.
That's a good point, because with an HOA, it's like a lot of city ordinances. You can't be less restrictive, but you can be more restrictive. And how restrictive do you have to be if you're an HOA if it goes too far beyond the requirement by the code and by the city ordinance?
Well, but that's up to the developer. I mean, if you, Greenwich Park is an example. Greenwich Park basically doesn't allow much in the way of fences at all.
Mm-hmm.
Some of Greenwich Park's lots back right up to Mount Etna Drive or Mount Etna Road. So in theory, they're subject to this.
Right, but my recollection is that they don't. I don't have the declarations in front of me. My recollection is that I'm not so sure that Greenwich Park even allows fences, except like fences around a garden, a small garden or flower area that's like right up against the house. Small,
And actually, we have a provision that's currently in process from that other package that excludes roads that are outside of the city limits. And I believe Mount Etna there is not in the city limits anyway, so.
Yeah.
I also found out from the county that Mount Etna has a minor collector classification.
Well, you gotta be kidding.
Yeah, I'm going to say the same thing, because I live off of Mount Etna Road, out going towards the golf course.
Don't shoot the messenger.
And believe it or not, my subdivision in its ordinances and the sheet of paper I got when I bought my property says no fences, but there's no homeowners association. So fences have been going up since I moved in 98 and 92.
Well, I tend to agree. I sort of agree with Doug. I think that option 3 is a reasonable solution that will accommodate the folks at Hager's Crossing, but doesn't sort of completely open everything up.
I agree with that too. And I don't know if it is up for discussion. However, I do agree that a public review meeting is in order also. So I don't know if that's something that we need to decide on or if that's just something that does happen, but
This would
just
be
to
a
make sure that,
So there would be a public hearing.
okay.
I think you're right, because like Bill, not, Doug, I don't think 4 is going to go.
I would also agree to number 3 is probably your best bet.
And this would be of help not only to Hager's Crossing, but Collegiate Acres, Ron's neighborhood, Fair Meadows, at Bangor Park Townhomes, and any houses along Landbell that would like a fence.
Well, that looks like it's the consensus.
All right, then I agree. Everybody agree with that? We have a consensus?
Yes, we do.
I think we do.
All right, let's move on then to the picket fence issue. I think that personally, I think 4 foot's understandable. I don't have a problem between 3 feet and 4 feet. I just don't want to get all that involved with it. Again, I don't want to put too many criterias that require too many people going out and measuring things. And I don't have a problem. In fact, I don't see any reason to control spacing at all. I just would just say 4 feet. That's it. You want to show us something though that's would
Yeah, up on the screen now is examples of fencing with the space in between narrower than the width of the picket. So that's the way that those look. And then,
That one is one.
yeah, these ones are wider spaces between the pickets. This is according to our code, this top one.
I think that's a level of granularity we probably should stay away from.
If it's going to be limited to 3 or 4 feet, as a practical matter, it's not going to look like a fortress.
No, it's not.
I mean, because anybody's going to be able, you're going to be able to see over it as you walk by.
right.
So I tend to think that going beyond that is unnecessary.
Well, in the ordinance, we differentiate between an open fence and a closed fence. So if you want to allow what amounts to a 4-foot privacy fence with no control over how much of the fence is open, we're going to need to tweak some of the other existing language. But the question is, do you really want to do zero definition of what an open fence is, which would allow for a 4-foot privacy fence in front yards?
I think we
That
need
would
to
not be good.
indicate that there should be some separation between the pickets.
As someone with a 4-foot with a 4-foot fence, which is one of those examples, you cannot see over it or can see over it. It's very easy. The
Yes.
slats in between are pointless. It wouldn't matter.
I think you're getting into aesthetics at that point. Is it aesthetically desirable or not to have a 4-foot privacy fence? Yes or no is really kind of the question there.
We can't just simply say that a definition of a picket fence would automatically have some kind of spacing.
How do I
Trying to make
enforce
this-
that?
Trying to make this simple. I don't want to get someone out there with a ruler.
I'm going to throw a wrench in it. Neighbor across the street just put in what I would call a modified picket fence. And what I mean by that is there's 2 rows of slats. The first row are lined together, and then the second row falls in between the first row, but is offset about an inch or so behind the first row, which means if you're standing looking at a 90-degree angle directly in, you really can't see in the yard. But if you stand on a 45-degree angle, you can look between the separation between the offset. So you got that. That's a hybrid, I would think. It's
in a backyard.
Yeah, well, no, it's in a backyard that's also, it's a corner house. So it's also part of the fence is facing the street that my house is on across the street.
And,
So it's like that corner house in your diagram there.
and I think all the streets in your neighborhood, Ron, are local streets, so it's not an issue.
Yes, but I'm just indicating that, you know, there's a type of fence that is semi-private. You can see through it if you stand at the right angle, but you can't if you stand at another angle. So, you know, I personally, I kind of like it myself.
We're getting into back to the other area. We have left that area about collector roads and minor and major. We're now just talking about the fence in the front, whether it's a picket or not.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I'm just talking about it doesn't matter where you put it. I was just indicating that, do you consider that a picket fence or a privacy fence, even though there's space in there where you can see through it?
So give some examples.
This is an example of a 4-foot privacy fence on the screen right now
Yes.
with no spacing in between.
So you're all saying that if we call it a picket fence, we could end up with a solid fence.
I wouldn't say so.
I want staff to answer that, please.
Excuse me. Okay.
If we're going to have an open fence, we need to define what an open fence is.
Oh, so we're going to term it open instead of picket. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So if we define it as open, do we have to define the spacing? I'm trying to avoid you all getting out there with a ruler. I mean, it's just, that's what I'm trying to do. Why make it so tough? Can we make it simple?
The only way to make it simple is not differentiate between an open fence and a closed fence, which will result in what you have on your screen there. You all need to decide whether or not that's acceptable or not.
I think it's acceptable.
I don't have any problem with it.
I do.
Again, as someone with a 4-foot fence that, I mean, having that on that lot right there on the corner, it would not, doesn't matter. You can see right into the yard. And I mean, there's nothing, a 4-foot fence is very small. And I think the aesthetics of it is, I mean, that there on my lot would look just fine.
Yeah, I also don't really have an issue with differentiating between the two, or not differentiating between the two.
I
guess.
do. Something like that in a lot of the other parts of town with historic homes, I think would look terrible.
But is it on a is it
I
on a
wouldn't-
road? Is it, I mean, is it on one of the roads that would require a 4-foot fence? I mean, there's not very many that would require that. A
No,
front facing yard. I have 2 front facing yards. That's the reason why.
Using that example that you have there, is that acceptable on Hamilton Boulevard? Is it acceptable on Oak Hill? Is it acceptable on Virginia Avenue? Name any residential street in the town and tell me whether or not you think that's an acceptable thing for half the block or the entire block necessarily to decide that they want to have too.
Frankly, I don't think that's good. I would like to see what I call a picket fence.
I agree.
But I this argument or this discussion keeps getting off to the side. I was just trying to say not to define the spacing. And then we go somewhere else. Now, but we're now here. So I think we need to decide whether this is acceptable throughout the community for a front yard, irregardless of what the road is. It's just a front yard. Because there's no definition, no difference between a major, minor, whatever, it's front yard. Is this acceptable for a front yard fencing? And I think I've heard 2 or 3 say yes. And I know at least 2 of us say no. Am I correct on that?
I would say that
No.
if we're going to be talking about a picket fence, then we have to say that there has to be some spacing between the pickets.
I don't, if I could get this focused on solid fence versus a fence with spacing. That's not
An open fence.
an open fence or a solid fence. Can we just talk about that, not getting into spacing, just a space?
Well, honestly, semantics would dictate that if you say open fence, that means that there's some sort of an opening in it.
That's right.
I don't really see that there's a need to go farther than that.
That's what I guess what I'm saying is I said spacing between it, then that's open fence.
Okay.
I would say that an open fence. When I said it has to have some type of spacing, that's what I'm saying. It should be open. It shouldn't be solid.
All right. So
This is Chris. I have a question. Is a chain link fence an open fence?
Yes.
However, you can't
we
do
don't
chain
want
link
that,
in
do
front
we?
yards,
say that again, Steve.
but you can't do chain link in front yards. Any up against the street, you cannot do chain link.
At all.
That is good.
So for front yards, fencing in front yards, do we want to support solid fencing or fencing that has some kind of spacing?
I'm going to go with the second one,
Kind of spacing.
spacing,
Open fence.
open, spacing,
Okay.
whatever.
All right.
I'm
Now-
okay with that.
Now do we want to define the spacing?
No.
Staff strongly urges you to do so. Otherwise, it's going to be an enforcement nightmare.
Why?
It's not an enforcement nightmare now, is it, Steve? I mean, as a practical matter.
Well, as a practical matter, it's not a problem because we require a zoning certificate for all fences anyway. So an inspector is going to go out and measure regardless of what you all say. So we're not saving anything by lifting some or not defining it, because ultimately the inspector's got to go out and inspect the fence for compliance with the issued permit anyway. So we're not saving any labor there. The inspector is going to go out. The thing is if you say open fence and you don't define it, then you're going to have somebody who's going to come in with can you all see me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
They're going to come in with a picket that's this wide and a gap that's this wide. And they're going to say, well, look, it's an open fence and your ordinance doesn't define what an open fence is. Staff strongly urges you to define it.
As a practical matter, Steve, I think most of these fences, are bought like pre-assembled sections. You get them at Lowe's or Home Depot and a lot of that. I mean, I'm not so sure how many of these fences are custom built anyway. And the ones that are,
Occasionally.
Very few.
Yeah. I've got one near me that the guy built. And it's kind of a interesting thing.
Right.
I have a question. Is a metal fence allowed in this category?
Ornamental.
I can't remember. For the front yard.
Ornamental, yeah.
Ornamental, okay. Well, that's an open fence, and you're definitely going to have a space that's
So the only thing that we could logically say is we may require a minimum space in between the pieces, because there's otherwise between the various types of fences, whether it be picket, whether it be ornamental metal, you're going to have a variety of spaces. And if we make it, there's really not a good way to define that unless we simplify it.
Well, I think Megan has some wording on it.
Yep.
Yeah, it's not in the
She
memo,
does.
but the recommendation would be spacing between wood or vinyl pickets needs to be at least 1 inch wide or half the width of the picket, whichever is greater.
Megan, what page are you on that has that?
I don't have that in the memo, but this was something Steve and Kathy and I talked about after the agenda went out.
I think that's good. I think that's a good start. It has to be no less than an inch spacing.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether that's a start or whether that's a finish, because there's not a whole lot more we could say about that. I think that's a good place to be at.
Well, let me suggest that we asked Megan to go ahead and go forward with that wording for our review at the next time, because this is not the last time we're going to see this.
That sounds good to me.
I agree.
Yep.
What we're
Agreed.
proposing is whether, if you had made a selection today, whether we could get this advertised for hearing at the end of the month.
Oh, but we can still change it after the hearing.
Absolutely.
Okay. Let's go forward then. If I suggest we go forward with the 4-foot with spacing as defined by Megan, and we'll just change it after the hearing if we don't like it.
Agreed.
Agree?
I agree.
Great.
That's
Sounds
all
like a
legal.
plan.
That's all legal.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
Okay. We
Excellent.
got around and around. We got there,
Yeah.
I think.
The scenic route,
All right.
lots of fences.
Yeah, big fancy day. I think we're done, right?
Doug,
Yeah.
just wanted to let you know, in the future, this shouldn't be as much of an issue as it is at Hager's Crossing, because when that development was approved, our subdivision ordinance didn't restrict you from putting, as we called it, butts on the street, having a lot back up to a street. Now you can't design a new subdivision that way.
Right. All righty.
Okay.
We're making progress.
Sounds
Couple years
good.
Down the road, we'll have it perfect. I thank you all for your time today. Your meeting's adjourned.
One
Oh, oh.
question, one quick question. It's possible, well, it is going to happen that City Hall is opening to the public in April. And it's possible, the mayor and council meetings will start to be open to the public at the end of this month and into April. So just wondering, what is the preference of the planning commission in terms of, in April, do you want to continue Zooming like this? Do you want to come into City Hall and have the public with us? You want a hybrid? Just wanted to get your input.
This is Chris. I'm not going to come back out until I get both of my shots. So if we do a hybrid, I think that might be.
Yeah, I think a hybrid option is probably the optimal way to go.
Yeah, I would like it if we can attend in person if we want to.
Yep.
And then folks that feel more comfortable doing it by Zoom could still do it by Zoom.
Agreed.
I bet that's, yes.
I would say that to keep from flipping back and forth, let's just say the next meeting would be Zoom.
Now,
The next meeting is going to be a public hearing, might not.
Oh,
be
a public hearing. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay.
Allowing the public to come in for a public hearing, if you're comfortable with that.
I am.
Well, I am, but I gotta admit, I mean, part of that's because I've gotten vaccinations.
So have I.
Well,
So,
I'll have my second one by the next meeting.
So hybrid is what we're saying.
Yeah, hybrid, because then the public can
Okay.
do if they're comfortable. It's just some people are not comfortable at all with the Zoom option, so they may not be participating as they would if they could come in the building. So it just gives more flexibility to the public if you're comfortable with that.
I would prefer hybrid because I find these meetings to be a struggle. To listen, make sure I catch everything. People talking over other people, not out of meanness or anything. It's just that's not the normal way we grew up talking. So
Yeah.
the sooner we can get back to real life presentations, I'm in everything, but in this, I'm ready.
Yep.
The March
I
31st,
think if we can get back to the hybrid, that'll be fine.
You got all that, Kathy? You know what we like?
yeah, March 31st hybrid.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll see some of your smiling faces then.
Yes.
Hopefully.
Thanks
At least the
again.
weather's getting nicer.
Yes.
Okay.
Meeting's adjourned.
See ya.
Okay.
Hey,
We'll
folks.
see you all.